Okay, looks like we're up and running on all the streams. YouTube is up, Facebook is up. All right, everybody, if you're on Facebook or YouTube or wherever you may be watching, make sure you check in and say hello. All right, all the recorders are up. Good morning and welcome to the New Media Show. My name is Todd Cochran. Of course, I'm joined by my co-host, Mr. Rob Greenlee. Rob, how you doing?
Doing terrific, Todd. It's great. We had a little bit of a bandwidth problem on Wednesday.
Yeah.
So if you didn't see us, it was because Todd had been speed limited somehow. I don't know if there was a story behind that, Todd.
Yeah, so everything was fat, dumb, and happy. I was getting great download speeds, but only like a half a meg up. And when I called them, they were all confused. They're like, well, we don't even have your modem registered. Or so it went on and on. She says, you're supposed to be 635. We updated your service. And so what it was I'd had a modem failure a couple months after I had the service put in here. The technician had come out and replaced the modem and never updated the database system. So it only took Spectrum 15 or 16 months to figure out that this modem, they didn't know who it belonged to. It was rogue, so they started clamping down on it, I guess.
Wow.
Yeah, it wasn't rogue. It was, and it was, I must have talked to 5 people. They're like, how? They just couldn't understand how we even had service. So, but they're coming Monday, so maybe I'll have 635 after Monday. So we'll see.
Well, you've got enough to do the show today. So
we're
get you back up.
Yeah, we're back at 20. So, So anyway, it was when we started the show on Wednesday, it was like the stream was failing, and I said, "Oh man!" Sometimes the TriCaster has a little hiccup, and I rebooted it, and you patiently waited, and I hit stream again, and it died immediately, and then I started seeing some insufficient bandwidth, and that's when I ran the speed test, and I'm like, well, yeah, we didn't have a show. It's not happening. We could have done a show and not, I got to thinking about it later. We didn't have to be live, but it's so much more.
Could have been recorded, right?
Yeah,
right.
It's so much more fun when you do that, but. Anyway, it's been a week, and, it seems like a lifetime because last week, this time we were talking with Chris Smith about all the things that he has concerns about, and I think that it's something that I've been thinking about more this past week.
Yeah. I've been actually wondering about it for, 5 years now or something like that.
Yeah.
Because I've been involved in it to some degree back then. I haven't been involved in it since I left Podcast One, but those were things that were going on back then that were puzzling me about what's going on in the space. And I can only see it, accelerating the whole trying to come up with a way of tracking impressions, right, around ad delivery. So that's what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
So. But there's a lot of stuff that happened in the last week. I was just going through all the news of different companies doing different stuff in this medium, and it just continues to just accelerate. I don't know what to say about that. I know we're both buried in so much stuff going on. It's hard to keep up with everything now.
Yeah, it is. And, I guess this week was, I will call it the Discovery Week. I had at least 5, maybe even 6. I was talking with my team about it on Friday. Got demos of all kinds of stuff people are trying, new tech and new ideas and way to build listeners. And, they got groups out there now that are, you as a podcaster pay them, and they somehow find you legitimate listeners for your show, so
interesting.
Yeah, that to me is always suspect when a company has that type of a service, but it runs the gamut: audio promotion, conversations, continuing the conversation after the show when it's in the engagement tools and all kinds of stuff. So
Yeah, I think that is kind of at the cutting edge of where we are, and I thought it was an interesting comment that Chris made last Saturday about how he thinks that many of the hosting platforms are going to become almost like studios. And I was like going, well, I don't think that's the model that we're on the track for right now. So I'm not really sure that that's really going to happen, but I do feel pressure, and I know you do too, from podcasters looking to their provider partners to help facilitate audience growth, and that does put you in the content business, right? It doesn't just being a tool provider. Seems like the expectations out there are moving beyond that. Whether or not that's right or realistic to think that either one of us can provide that to tens of thousands of podcasts that are on our platform that's a whole nother conversation.
I think that everyone used to be really willing to do the work themselves, and now people are so busy, they just want to pay someone else to do that work. And I don't think it works that way in podcasting. And
no, I don't. Yeah. And more people are discussing the concept of building relationships with listeners, right? And I don't. Those two are contrary to each other. If you think about it, the methodology of building relationships with listeners is not an artificial or a contractable process, right? Some things have to be done with the host and their listeners, right? You can't really outsource relationships, I don't think.
And you have to, and the reason most of you come to the show is to listen to Rob and I, and you provide feedback from time to time, and we've got people on live today, Matt and Eileen. Thanks for saying hello. Yeah. But we know that even though we're doing this show live, that the majority of people that are going to be listening to it are going to listen via podcast later. So we understand that you're all busy, but and don't have time to spoon feed Rob and I dialogue back. But every once in a while we get some feedback from the show, and it's good. But I don't necessarily count on it, because everyone's trying to build their shows. At least I'm assuming pretty much everyone that listens to this show is trying to build a show. There's some industry folks as well that are listening in too, and we appreciate that they do that. But I've just, I keep doing these consults with podcasters, and I'm up to about 5 or 6 a week, and I spend 30 minutes with the podcaster, and we just go over what they're doing, what they've done, and again, fundamentally, I continue to find, and this is just, this is just fact. Podcasters are not doing what they need to do to build their shows on their own. They just do not. And, I've got a call with a gal on Tuesday who's with a competitor, and she asked why, and it's not Libsyn. She asked, why should I move to Blueberry? And I said, this is a bigger conversation. It's just not about moving to Blueberry podcasting. I says, it's more of, I see a dozen things that you immediately can do without changing hosts to improve things. Now, I'm going to try to get her business, but at the same time, I'm also going to explain to her why she's probably having challenges in growing the show. So it's just, again, you just can't do just the podcast anymore. There's more to it. It's everything.
Well, and where you host it isn't necessarily there's any direct relationship to how you grow your show too. And that's what we were just saying, really, is that the hosting platforms are being looked to as marketing platforms more and more, just because of how much work it does take to build an audience to a show. And some shows have advantages in that pursuit, and other shows have challenges. And it's not a perfect science to do this stuff. Some genres of content are going to have a limited reach. Other ones have larger reach. So it's not a perfect fit. But I have these conversations like you, Todd, with podcasters, thinking that if I move from this platform to that platform, all my problems are going to be solved. And very rarely the case.
Rare.
If you really drill into what they need and what they're trying to do and what their strategy is, that really dictates what platform to go to. But to some degree, there's not a lot of significant difference between all of our platforms at the very core.
Yeah, at the core of delivering media is delivering media.
Right, but there is functional differences between our platforms and the areas that we focus on as offering tools around. Todd, your platform is kind of, specialized to a certain way of doing it, but it's not, that special way of doing it isn't the only way you can do it. You can do it just like what any other host is doing. So, just changing hosts isn't a problem. No. There's actually a lot of issues with changing hosts that are possible, right? Sometimes those processes don't go smoothly. I had to deal with an issue this morning with a large network that moved, and they made a couple of mistakes in the move and lost some audience over a period of time, and they didn't go in and check what they had done with all of the listening platforms, just to make sure that everything had been redirected and shifted over, and they lost a big chunk of audience for a couple months because they didn't go look at what was going on. So that's another takeaway too, is when you make a shift to another platform, you got to go through and check all your distribution areas, especially the key ones. But it is a complex ecosystem now, and a lot of people just don't understand how each platform is kind of a little different. And they may or may not pick up RSS redirects. I mean, most of them are now, but still errors can happen, and you just have to be on top of it.
I think too is, we had, fortunately, knock on wood, we haven't seen that happen, but I also tell people, all right, if you're going to move, just breathe. This is a process.
Right.
We want you to consult with us, and we'll help you out and make sure you follow the steps and, a whole checklist, which isn't that big. But you're right. There's certain things you have to do.
Well, and it's more difficult. I mean, single show moves are definitely less complicated than trying to move like a dozen shows at the same time.
Depends.
I mean, it should be the same, but the complexity of that is a little different, right? Especially if each of those shows maybe is not available on all the listening platforms or whatever the complications that exist around that. Most of the time it goes smooth, but sometimes it doesn't, and that's unfortunately what can happen. It's not a common occurrence that there's problems. Believe me, most moves are seamless and don't have any problems, but occasionally some have a problem.
So I think, though, for me, it's a little frustrating because in what I tell folks in calls is nothing more than they would find the same information almost anyone that talks about growing a show or building a show. These steps, these things you can do are very commonly laid out. But more often than not, I get the, how should I describe it? I get that's a lot of work response.
Yeah, that's true. And the medium is getting more complicated because there's more distribution platforms. And each one of them has a little bit of a different, methodology. It isn't like that they're all the same. It's not a homogenistic ecosystem. This is, each player likes to do their own little unique things. So, which makes it hard for people to fully grasp and understand the difference between what Stitcher's doing versus what Spotify's doing. Right?
It's not
always an easy thing to understand.
Yeah, and for us, it's not even that. It's for me, distribution is distribution, and it's all pretty seamless. It's just the things you can do besides recording, besides putting your show out,
Right.
And we've talked about it here on the show many, many times.
Well, and it's gotten easier the last couple of years because for a few years there was a few platforms out there that were caching your episodes.
Right.
which was even creating a even more complicated discussion to have with people about what was going on with their shows.
And I would tell, I guess I just tell podcasters and those of you that listen to this show, we don't have to rehash this, but you can help us. You really can if you're out there and someone's, talking about their show and they're having challenges growing. I can almost guarantee if you just take 5 minutes, go look at their website, go look at their show notes, you do a couple of searches, just see some basic stuff. You can almost, within the majority of shows, within 3, 4, 5 minutes, you can probably come up with a half dozen things. I heard someone the other day make a comment on Facebook that said, "Who subscribes anymore?" And I kind of laughed. I really laughed about that when that person said, "Who subscribes anymore?" And I'm just like, the majority of podcast listeners are still subscribing. And then they've got
Well, it may not be called subscribe. It could be follow or like or something too. So, yeah.
But, and I'm just, I'm like, okay, now if you're not worried about that, then you're not you're technically, if you're not promoting someone subscribing or liking or whatever it may be on whatever platform to your show, then you're just a show. And then you're going to have to work even more hard to build retention and build ongoing people that will tune into your show. And because then they have to, it's not, see, here again, it goes back to, Rob, I know the podcasts that I listen to are here and waiting for me in my mobile device. I know they're there. I may not have listened to a show for a week or two, but I know they're there. And I've purposely done that action to make sure I know they're there. Now, if I'm just haphazardly, let's say that I want to listen to show X, I don't want to have to go find it. That's a lot of work to go find show X and then be able to say, okay, I want to listen to this episode. That that to me, the beauty and how we've built this space and how we've gotten people to engage and to be, when we're having this conversation with people is because they purposely have done an action to subscribe to you. It's like it's being in the car and hitting FM 103.3. You purposely tuned into that station. Now, maybe you did seek till you found something in the radio, on the radio. But then, but again, I guess maybe I'm talking in circles here, but I think that a lot of podcasters have forgot the importance of this medium and the importance of getting your podcast listeners to do some action on whatever platform it is to lock you in. So you're there to listen at a moment's notice. Say, oh yeah, let me go listen to that show. Oh, open the app up, there it is, click, done. Instead of having to go search and find a show. The amount of times I go to websites now and I find no way to subscribe to the show. None, zero. There is not a single, there's nothing for Apple Podcasts, there's nothing for Google Podcasts, there's nothing for any of these sites. And I'm like, and they're complaining that they're not growing audience. I'm like, duh. You're not even giving people the opportunity to even engage with you.
Well, you're not offering the opportunity for a listener to make a commitment to your show. That's,
right.
I think at the concept level, that's what's really going on there. When a person clicks subscribe or like or follow or whatever that terminology is, they've made a choice, right? They've said, I'm going to listen to this show on a regular basis, right? If they're just going to your website and they see a player there, they may or may not click on the play button, right? They may be passing through, right? So that's the concept behind the whole subscribe. It's a level of commitment, and why it worked so well in the past is because when you hit subscribe, that meant that you got an episode at least, right? Delivered to your device,
and and maybe that is not as important that the media is delivered to the device,
right?
But
it is a commitment.
There are places I go right now where there's no cell signal. and I can still listen to shows, and I don't think anything about it.
Yeah.
But
I mean, how are we closing on that relationship with that audience member?
Yeah.
That's an important question. It's an important question in any kind of sales relationship. And I did use the word relationship, and that's what you're creating with your audience, is you're creating a relationship with them. And sales is part of that process. I mean, we're all basically salespeople selling our shows to our audience. And that's kind of how we have to think about it.
Rick says in chat, there's a large contingent of folks who get into thinking that podcasting is this magical process that by merely putting one out will guarantee an audience and monetization and fame and all that other stuff. And it simply doesn't work that way. Well, I had a call with he's a retired, high-ranking Navy enlisted person, very, very high-ranking Navy enlisted person that's been out of the Navy for a while, for about a year. And he's doing a podcast. And he's one of these real, high-speed, high-energy guys. You get on the phone with him, if you're going to be on for 30 minutes, you're going to get 2 hours worth of work done in 30 minutes. That's the kind of phone call you're going to have. And we're just discussing where he was at, and he's hosting on some platform that has a boat anchor, and talking about what he's doing and his strategy, and there was just, and I didn't, I'll probably at some point get his business, but I'm also building a relationship to help somebody that I have I'm retired Navy, so it's a little close and dear to my heart. So having a conversation with him about just 2-3 things that he could do on his own to get, because he was saying, hey, it's not growing as fast as I thought it would. And this guy's got, he's got some interviews, some really leadership type of set you back in your chair and make you learn something type interviews. And so he says, hey, I didn't know what I was doing. I just got into this. Thought it would be great to add a podcast to my website. Doing a podcast with the other group, I show up, I'm a guest, and I thought it'd be, and so I think that's what happens to a lot of podcasters too. Is a lot of individuals, especially high speed, low drag, high meaning this, an upper echelon of, you just have this. Maybe it's not right to say it this way, but this guy was at the cream of the crop. He was at the top. And he had perspectives and access to people that you and I would never get just because of his position. So he has all this different type of great retrospect and everything. And I think that there's a lot of that. And you've got all these real super successful people out there that time and time again, they're like, why isn't my show growing? And it's just because I think sometimes they don't have enough time. Maybe they should have employed someone, spent some money and had someone with some production or, some of that type of stuff. So I for a guy like him, I'm going to say, hey, let's get you connected with some people that can help you. And I think that's what we have to do too, because there's definite, we all support indie podcasters, and this guy's an indie podcaster, even though he's pretty high level. There's no reason why his show wouldn't have 500,000 downloads an episode. But I think there's just a few things that has to be done. I struggle with this because you try to tell people, well, you don't want to say, well, that was a dumb shit move to be over there. You don't want to make them feel bad. But at the same time, you just want, you can just see it, and you can just see where the deficiencies are.
Yeah.
You can lead a horse to water, you can't make him drink.
No, people have to have their own learning process about things, and if it works for them, it works for them. That's always the key thing. You can only convince somebody that they need to make a change if it makes sense to them. And that's the key. And that's part of that sales process I was talking about too. It's identifying what the needs are, and then seeing if there's a match for the solution that you might have for them. So that's kind of how I look at the market. And I've been in sales for most of my life in some capacity or another. And that's essentially what we all are. I mean, I consider myself kind of a salesperson. I don't, and a person that builds relationships with other people and solves problems on that process of a sale. And a sale can be just creating a relationship.
Sure.
You know? It doesn't have to be that I actually have to transact something with them. But Todd, I did see some research that came out. It was linked to off of the Pod News site. Thanks, James. It was put out by Team Whistle. I don't know if you're familiar with these folks.
I'm not.
TeamWhistle.com. They put out a little bit of a study talking about, it's called Ear to the Ground, the active state of podcast listening primes Gen Z and millennials for brand love if done right, is the title of this study that they did. The key takeaway of this study was podcast listening is an active, engaged, lean-in experience, and because this generation is actively listening, they are attuned and ready to receive a brand message. So that's kind of the key takeaway. But the 5 findings in this study, and there's more detail than this too, is that listeners in that age group tend to be a little bit more affluent. They're probably a little more educated. This study says that they're male sports fans, but that's rather, I think, that's a little bit too niche on this topic. But number 2, podcasts are replacing TV in many of these people's lives as a way to engage or enhance other activities that they're doing, like maybe games or lots of other things that they're doing in the online world. And then people prefer to learn with podcasts over books. So makes sense. It's easier to listen than it is to read in most situations. And hosts need to be funny and relatable. This gets back to a lot of the things that we've been talking about. The difference between shows that are successful or not is that the hosts need to be relatable. They need to be entertaining, and they need to bring value to their audience. And I guess that applies to the younger generations here too. And Gen Z prefers shorter duration. And this is also key to the foundation of podcasting too, that the younger generation likes about podcasting, is it's typically unscripted and off-the-cuff formats, which guess what this one is?
That's right.
So, and which I think is kind of another way of saying, very authentic and real and not staged or, contrived, I think is what that also means.
Do you know what personas are?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I work with personas a lot, especially when I was working with Xbox. Yeah.
So,
did that a lot. Yeah.
We work with personas a lot.
Yeah.
And personas are, for those of you that don't know, is, who are you? Who do I think you? Well, personas can be developed several ways.
Well, who's your ideal customer is what it really is.
Well, or not necessarily ideal. It could be like us. I have 5 or 6 primary customer personas.
Right.
And they fit into certain...
There's usually a range of those personas. It's usually, in my experience, it's usually 5 to 6.
Right.
Different ones that basically take you across a spectrum of potential customers or users of whatever you're trying to build, right? So yeah.
So the goal is to build a persona and then validate a persona. Make sure that you are really, that persona is really the person that you think they are. In other words, if you think they're millennial or they're not technically inclined, there's this whole thing that goes around with it. It's a
whole spectrum that, it can get down to the level of they shop at Whole Foods and they spend half their time on Facebook and the other half with Instagram or something. I mean, it can be that kind of granularity.
Yeah. I don't go that deep because I don't care if they shop at Whole Foods or where they, I'm just more, well, anyway, you're right. The personas can get pretty deep and companies use them all the time. for marketing
Right.
research and figure out where they're going to build product to. And,
It's also used for marketing too.
Right,
So
right, for marketing, yeah.
There's a variety of reasons, and I guess it also can help developers build a product that
That's
actually
right.
caters to an actual person.
That's right.
Not just solves a technology problem.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
It allows you to focus. So, I think what we've seen in the podcasting space is, as a podcasting company, I'm thinking about podcaster personas, creator personas. And I've never really taken much time to think about listener personas.
Right.
Because, how I stay in business is, podcasters, the listener
We're
personas.
not really on the listening side, actually.
No, but this report here by Whistle and this ear to ground report is probably one of the, this is the type of stuff that this is gold. If you think about the data that they've shared here with this study, and again, I don't know their background. I'm sure they took a lot of time to get this right. It's a very very clean report for those of you that haven't seen it, but they could probably do one of these a week, and all the different age ranges, and it probably can go pretty far. But this is something as a podcaster. Who's your persona? Who's your listener persona? So this is stuff that as a podcaster you should be devouring and looking at it. And it says, okay, are you trying to reach the 13 to 34-year-old range?
Right.
And if you run your own demographic survey and find out where your audience really is, you'll kind of know, you'll validate some of this data. But
I thought it was interesting. It really cuts back to, in some ways, the foundations of this medium, which is validated in some ways in here, because I think we've been going down this path of thinking that, scripted, pre-produced, highly edited content is what everybody wants, right?
People like YouTube videos raw.
Right. And I'm not sure, that that's necessarily the case. Especially as you look at the younger generation that's coming up, what is their experience? They want authentic. They want to have real stuff.
Right.
I mean, that's what they're looking for, but they also want to be educated too.
Because they're not as, how should I say it? They already have been in a society where we have stuff going on, not only on social media, but on mainstream media, that makes them doubt the authenticity of the message being put forward to them. And they are not necessarily want to be entertained. So I think that probably, in my opinion, runs part of the reason why they like podcast. And
well, I think, Todd, one of the biggest issues in our culture and our society today is trust.
Right.
There's people have a hard time trusting much of anything these days.
Oh, that's a fact.
And that causes all sorts of unintended consequences. That'd be a nice way of saying it.
And and it's it runs. That could be a whole show in itself just talking about that. But I think that as a podcaster, you're doing your show. Who are you doing your show for? Who are your listener personas?
Right.
Are you annoying them by getting off topic on something? How do you keep that audience engaged? My audience, there's a segment of my audience that hates my first 10 minutes of my personal show.
Mm-hmm. That's always been the case.
Always been the case from the beginning. Right. Come on, get into it. Let's go.
Right.
I tell them fast forward 10 minutes.
Those are usually new listeners to your show.
Right. They're usually new. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And every once in a while, I have to kind of, after I get 2 or 3 emails maybe in a row from someone that says, hey, come on. I'll explain on the next episode again, hey, this is just a little indoctrination for those of you that are new. we spend 10 minutes here just kind of talking, and then we get into the stack. So where you and I, we just kind of jump in, we just barrel in head first. So we don't get that complaint here that we're wasting people's time. But on my personal show, I do. But it's how the show's been.
Right. Well, it's establishing that personal relationship with. It's almost like a filter, actually, Todd, to some degree, if you think about it. Right. You're making a connection with your audience, but you're self-filtering it. Those that don't appreciate it, you're probably not going to keep.
Right.
But the ones that do stick around, and if you do it, that audience expects it from you now, right?
So the key takeaway again in that study, podcast listening is active, engaged, and lean in experience. Okay, I think we've known that from the beginning, and because this generation is actively listening, they were tuned and ready to receive a brand message. Now, does that mean they're ready to hear advertising, or they want to hear a podcast brand?
A brand message, not an advertisement. A brand message is something beyond an advertisement.
Right. So I use the word brand a lot. Build your brand.
Right.
Build your brand.
Right.
Don't build someone else's brand. I probably say that more in a week than anything.
Well, brand should be about trust.
But
whatever it is that you're talking about, these days, brand needs to represent an effort around trust.
So what's a brand? A brand would be Tide, Forward. Those are brands. And I think of my show.
Well, Todd, you're a brand. Todd Cochran is.
Right.
It's a personal brand is what I would call that.
But I also have my show that I consider a brand. This show consider a brand.
Right.
And so when they say they're tuned and ready to receive a brand message, it basically means that they're buying into an establishment or a content product. And that is, I think a lot of people do that. So
though I think some people hear that, Todd, and they think immediately advertising.
Yeah, it's not.
And I'm not sure that that's what it means.
No. GoDaddy's not my brand.
Right.
My brand is, Geek News Central. It's about building, giving tech news, information, sharing my opinion. That's the brand of that. That's what that's all about, breaking it down. This show, what do we do here? The New Media Show. We talk about podcasting. We talk about issues within it. This is the brand of this show. We don't spend a lot of time talking about our dogs. Of course, I don't have one right now, but you know what I mean. We don't spend time talking about a bunch of other stuff. So this is a
really good example of this is if you think about companies that have been started that have been focused on some sort of a social, cultural change or nonprofit relationship, right? That companies have a philosophy behind them, right? What does that brand stand for?
Right.
What does it represent? What issues in the world and the culture is that brand trying to change or improve or inspire? I mean, all those words and those referential things are what we're talking about here. They're what does this show mean, Todd, to someone? What are we doing in the show? I strive every time we do this show to be honest and to be fair and to build trust with the people that listen to this show. Sometimes we piss people off.
Yes, we do.
Sometimes we make people happy because we've shown a light on something that people don't understand. So there's risk in being trustworthy or being honest. It doesn't come without risk.
I don't think it comes without risk, but it comes with great responsibility.
Yeah.
Because we have a little bit of fun smacking on Anchor once in a while. Of course.
Right.
We have fun with that. But we also recognize what they have done, and making it easy for people to start podcasting. In the same regard, And it's just, kind of our own little nature to be able to do that. But at the same time, I think that we can give plus and minus reasons for anything of using any type of service or, recommendations. And
right.
Yeah, I think your point is well on, Rob. But I think that one of the key findings in this thing, it says Gen Z prefers shorter duration, unscripted, and off the cuff formats. So in other words, a little bit entertaining. So
right, yeah, I've worked with a lot of shows over the years that were like that. Right, they were conversational shows, not unlike what we do, but they were much more focused on humor and irony and brutal, honest, stories around people's experiences in life, and those are shows that connect with people because people can associate with that. Or the very early days of the comedy podcasts, I think was what really kind of opened my eyes to this concept more than I'd ever had before, was the emotional connections that listeners have to comedians that have a lot of personal problems, right?
Yeah.
That an audience can relate to. I don't know if you remember that documentary that was created by a couple of comedians down in Los Angeles. That really showed it to me. I think in just the impact that some of those comedians have on listeners that either have alcohol problems or they have drug problems or they have issues in their lives that listener can listen to and go through the steps of recovery or go through the steps of working their way through those things. And that's how podcasts can have a significant impact on someone's life.
I look at the show my mom and I did when my dad died. And we just, his 14th, his death anniversary, I guess if that's such a thing, just passed, so we, to have a little remembrance time. But, we did a show that was about her transition to being a widow and, the problems she had and like crying when she couldn't find the lawnmower key and, that kind of stuff,
Right.
And so it was authentic, and I think we did well and were able to reach who we need to reach, but we got to a certain point where we'd said what we had to say and we were done. The show remains online today, but I think it goes back to something here Rick says too. He says, coincidentally, one of my regular viewers of my wine stream told me that he told me that was one of the reasons he likes my show. He likes a stream of consciousness off the cuff stories. So, you'll say something here and it'll make me think about something and, vice versa. And so I think it makes people think. So again, there's a lot of stuff in this study that I think we all knew, we all realized, but it is to see the information broke down.
Yeah. And it even gets to the level here, and we should probably offer a link to this slide deck, but one of the slides says hosts that are funny and relatable keep them engaged.
Right.
That's referring to listeners. The number one is funny. The next one is relatable, and that's a complex term. But hosts that have some energy to what they're doing are smart. Now that's a subjective orientation as well. Compassionate. A lot of these are very subjective, right?
Yeah.
So there's no one way of being compassionate. Thought provoking, that's asking good questions and trying to come up with an answer and asking your audience to think about things as well. And provocative, which is a little bit controversial, right? Which is, I think if you think about this show, there's a little bit of funny. I think we both are fairly relatable. I think we're sometimes energetic, not always. Hopefully we're perceived as smart, right? And I think we're definitely compassionate, thought-provoking. We hope so.
I hope so.
And provocative, very much so.
And definitely the smart part is subjective.
Right. We always have different smarts, right?
Right.
So I'm not quite sure what that always is.
And believe me, there's a lot of smart people out there, It took 15 minutes for Chris Smith last week to finally pound into my head what the heck was being done, and then I had to slap the head moment like,
Right.
You got to be kidding me.
Right. Yeah. Well, the reason that you were having a hard time comprehending what he was telling you is because it is incomprehensible. So
when I finally got Angelo on the phone and I explained it to him, and he was dumbfounded. He was just like, he was like, and they're counting that way? I said, yeah. He said, I could see him just, I could just see his head down, shaking his head, so.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Such is my life at Podcast One. So then there's another slide in here that I thought was very interesting as well. It talks about shorter podcasts, right? But what it doesn't say in the earlier slide is that what they consider to be a shorter podcast. The millennials prefer podcasts that are 94 minutes long. So is that shorter? No. And then Gen Z is 71 minutes. So it's shorter compared to the millennials that want 94 minutes. But, this show's 90 minutes, right? So we're right in the sweet spot for millennials, Todd.
My personal show used to go an hour and 10 minutes. Now it's about 55. And
so you're in the Gen Z
right
category.
And Gen Zs are probably not listening to my show.
No, they're not.
They might be,
Right. But I thought that was a little bit of a deceptive statement that community prefers shorter podcasts. So yeah.
So
they are pretty long.
Yeah. So I tell you, both Sirius and iHeart and everyone is they're all in. Sirius XM is a new destination for original, exclusive, and popular podcasts. I have such a hard time taking them serious. I know they're getting big audiences, but I just have such a difficult time believing that. I just, okay. Yeah, maybe the Marvel relationship, who knows? But is anyone really going to Sirius and finding new, original, exclusive, or, maybe it's because they're doing so much promotion and we're getting more listeners come in this space that don't know about the rest of the ecosystem.
Well, Todd, like we've been saying for years, I mean, at the end of the day, it is really about the content, right?
Right.
It doesn't really matter how it's distributed, really. I mean, you've always said that you just want listeners. You don't care how they listen.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, that is to some degree true, I think, in what's happening in the medium right now. Content's going behind, passwords and not really a podcast, but in some ways it's going to be seen as a podcast. So it's just a matter of, we prefer the open distribution format, which most people do, but that may not be how everybody else looks at it over the long term.
So do you remember me? And here's where we piss people off, or I piss people off. Do you remember when I said, and have said, and probably you said too many times, if something is free, you're more than likely the product? Where
you're more likely to what?
You're more likely to be the product. In other words,
yes, correct. Right. They're selling you if you're
right.
If it's free,
and
right.
you wonder how companies that are doing attribution and all kinds of other stuff are able to survive. Let me read this statement here, and then we'll come back to that thought. Experian has bought Tapad for $280 million. Attribution company Podsights describes them this way. A number of providers have sprung up in the last decade offering massive databases of every household IP mapped to identifiers they have seen at that IP. Tapad and Drawbridge are the two of the largest. Acast, AdWiz, Podsights, and Chartable use them, among others.
I saw that. Plus, also think about this too. Experian also keeps track of your credit rating.
Mm-hmm. So
you think about combining all that data, right?
So if you didn't think the data that's being collected A number of
Wow.
providers have sprung in the last decade offering massive databases of every household IP mapped to identify if they're seen at that IP. And if Acast, AdWiz, Podsites, and Chartable are using them, it goes right back to what I continue and you guys continue to say, and maybe it doesn't matter anymore, but our
It does
audience,
appear like the ship has sailed,
the
Todd.
ship has sailed.
Yeah.
The ship has sailed.
Yeah.
So you never know. You never know who is using what and using what data. Yep.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
There's another slide. This teamwhistle.com, the research they did is just so, I can say, kind of provocative, right? I mean, a lot of stuff that's in this. So I would definitely recommend that you go look at it. Whether or not it's 100% accurate is a whole nother question.
Oh, you're talking about the whistle.
Well, yeah, I was just looking at the chart that's in here. A medium wherein advertising is already accepted as part of the listening experience. Now they're talking about podcasts are a useful medium for advertisers to reach engaged audiences, and what they do is they compare audiences' preference to advertising between podcasts and streaming TV services, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it shows about 50% of people that listen or watch pay TV services prefer to get a subscription, right? And 50% prefer to get ads, right? So it would be a free service. Podcasts, that same distribution, 39% prefer to pay for a subscription and 61% prefer to have ads. So you think about, there's more acceptance of advertising in podcasts than there are
supporting it
in TV.
Yeah. So this is a very interesting paragraph. It's no surprise that companies want to buy Wondery, said CEO Herman Lopez in a piece from Sam Bloke and .la. The companies explain internationally, and Wondery's audience is bigger now than it was before the pandemic, he says. Are they getting desperate to sell?
Hernan, you mean?
Well,
is that a quote from Hernan?
Yeah.
Okay.
Are they getting desperate to sell their... Oh, I'm not even going to read the title of this.
I don't know if
I
would use the term desperate or not. I'm not quite sure.
Here's the headline.
An opportunity, right?
The headline, of course, you can't see it, Rob, because you can only see me, but it says, fighting bribery charges. Lopez says it's not surprising companies want to buy Wondery. Oh my God. What a headline. Oh my God.
What read the headline again?
Fighting bribery charges. Lopez says it's not surprising companies want to buy Wondery.
What?
That's in hey, that's a headline off of .la.
Wow.
It's like they put
so why do you think that they're saying that?
I don't know. It's a little bit odd that they would slam him like that. It's a full interview. He's got a full interview in here, but they didn't hold no punches in the headline. My gosh.
So what else is it saying there?
Let's see here. Talks about him being under fire. Talks about... Oh, they go right into the bribery stuff and fraud allegations. Again, allegations.
Yeah.
And then they ask about, is Wonder going to be acquired? He asked about his vision of the podcasting space.
Mm-hmm.
Talks about Wondery's further growth. talk about being out in Los Angeles. So it's just a little bit weird of an article that they're crushing him in one hand and then talking good about Wondering in another. Interesting strategy.
They're thinking that the company's for sale because
they
it
don't
needs to be in somebody else's hands or something like that.
Don't make
the investors.
They don't make that. I haven't read it in detail to see if that's the slant, but you would maybe. Again, I can't say how the. I'm just I'm doing Reader's Digest version here. I'm just taking highlights.
Yeah, so. I think both of us would not. I'm not trying to pass judgment on anybody here. We're just seeing what's going on, what people are saying about what's happening here.
Yeah. So
I don't know if he's going to be convicted or not. No one does.
Yeah, no one does. Yeah.
Right.
Again, you're innocent until proven guilty in a court of law, and
right.
So, but it is. Well, we'll just leave it at that, I guess. But I didn't. I saw the headline on the news site, and then I went to the article, and it had a much more poignant.
It had a lot more,
much more kick to the headline than I thought it was going to have. So, but
so I guess Volvo spent $2.1 million on advertising in October.
Fantastic.
I thought that was an interesting stat. And Amazon, the number 3 largest.
Where are they spending their money?
$2.7 million Amazon spent on podcast advertising.
I have not heard an Amazon ad. Has anybody heard an Amazon ad? Where you wonder if some of that is just, where that's being siloed.
And it says here the number 2 largest advertiser in podcasting is ZipRecruiter at $3 million in October, and the number 1 was BetterHelp at $3.7 million.
BetterHelp.
It's an online counseling service.
Oh, that's interesting.
Mental health counseling.
Yeah. Huh.
I guess that makes sense in some ways.
I guess, but they're advertising. Yeah, I guess it makes sense because I think a lot of people are suffering.
Yeah, I know a lot of online kind of counselors that are doing online sessions and things like that they're all really busy. I mean, a lot of them do podcasts.
Yeah,
and I keep hearing that all of them are just slammed with work. People having all sorts of problems. So those podcasters that are psychologists and counselors are, and doing podcasts are staying very busy these days.
There's a new podcast awards. It's being run by, it's called the SaaS, SAAA, Software as a Service. Right. Podcast awards have been launched. And there is a podcast host category.
Oh.
So there's 4 categories. And there's actually a category for a best episode for someone in a founding story and or a founding story, I think is what the term was. So it's 4 interesting categories. So that's available. And where's it? Where's the website? I forget. It's at microconference.com. But I think they have, I don't know if it's listed from the main site or not. Yeah, if you go to microconference, not within, just microconf, CONF.com, you'll be able to see they have a link at the top of the page where you can nominate your favorite shows. So, it's interesting. It's a little micro category of podcast.
Yeah, it's interesting.
But let's see what else.
So I guess there's a new audio consumption app in Russia that's been launched.
Yeah, we don't hear too much about what's going on with podcasting in Russia, do we?
But this is, it's called Arzamaz. I can't say that right. But,
yeah, you have to ask your son how to pronounce that in Russian.
Well, I don't even know that he even speaks that well. So, and let's see here. Actually, he's likely going to be moving back to the U.S.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow. So, with your grandchildren as well?
Mm-hmm.
Well, good for him. He's had enough?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I'm not sure. I think it's more just wanting to get back to the U.S., I think.
Living overseas, there, as much as people complain about the United States,
right?
I've had the fortunate to be able to live a lot of different places. I lived 6 years in 2 different stints in Guam. That really is not a foreign country; it's a U.S. territory, so probably doesn't count. But I've been in enough places for enough length of time. It's the United States, for those of us that grew up here, it's pretty good.
I mean, from what I hear, Russia has a hard time keeping their citizens. I'll just put it that way. They actually pay their citizens.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
So, I'll just leave it at that.
Well, I have been in like Kazakhstan and places like that, which is old satellite country of Russia, and there is it's truly feels Russian, feels Eastern European.
I mean, it's not horrible there from what I understand. I see a lot of pictures, and I see, I talk to my son about it a lot, and it's not it's a lot like here in a lot of ways. It's just there's some aspects of it that are a little rough around the edges. Might be a nice way of saying it. So, right.
I have a friend.
But it is don't think of it as a horse and buggy kind of world.
Right.
It's a modern world with all of the modern conveniences, most of the modern conveniences that we have.
The keyword is most, not all the time, though.
Right. I can't say that. Well, the grocery stores aren't quite as diverse,
right,
in brands, but they do have a lot of diversity in the grocery stores.
Rob, if you go anywhere in the world, grocery stores are not as diverse as here in the United States. Now, maybe you go to Spain or places like that, they have some pretty diverse grocery stores.
They do. I've been to many grocery stores in Europe. Yeah, and it's some of it's indistinguishable.
That's right. You're like, what is that?
It's maybe a little too diverse in my opinion, but that's okay.
But you can almost be guaranteed wherever you're at in the world, you can always get a Coke and you get a bag of chips. Specifically,
there's probably a McDonald's around the corner.
Yeah, and it is kind of fun when you go to a McDonald's in another country.
And a Starbucks. There hasn't been too many countries that I've gone to that I haven't been able to pop into a Starbucks if I wanted a quick American experience.
You would suffer here, Mike. The closest Starbucks for me is 30 miles away. I don't have a Starbucks in my town, but I've got 2 something elses. They're called something else.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I'm following a guy on YouTube that he doesn't have a podcast. Well, I think he's getting ready to start one. And him and his wife, Chinese wife, escaped China because he was doing YouTube stuff and, being a little bit too open about society and things going on there. And he got out by the skin of his chin because they were going to roll him up. And now he's talking about all these things that the Chinese government is doing to his family, her family there, to put pressure on him to keep his mouth shut from talking about the country and the regime and everything else. So I think podcasts like that, where you are actually exposing what really happens underneath the curtain of communism, would be a great podcast. People that have stories like that with real life activities going on, and
Well, I was gonna travel back to Russia at some point before the COVID thing hit, and I would have been able to, ascertain a little bit what was going on back there and what that experience was. But yeah, it's been interesting. I think just my bigger kind of thought on it is that I think we get shown or given an impression here of how someplace is that may not be extremely accurate, or it just isn't talked about. And
Right.
I think it creates a lot of views of different places around the world based on movies or cinematic presentations of things that are not always accurate.
And I think from my perspective, I would probably feel safer traveling to Russia than I
Right.
would traveling to China at this point.
They have a very kind of fairly, from what I gather, it's a lot easier to travel to Russia than it is, somebody from Russia coming to the U.S.
Right, I'm sure.
So as you think about it from a travel or a visa perspective, it's a lot harder to get into the U.S. than it is to get into Russia.
Well, that's, the United States is ranked I think 9th or 10th when it comes to your passport being able to get into countries. The best ones is the Japanese and the Swiss. I think they're the top two passports that'll get you almost anywhere without a visa.
Right.
But you go down the list then, and the United States makes it very hard for people to visit, especially if they have a social economic status. And the country is known for not being very, or for being poor, because people come here and they don't leave, and that's part of the reason they've cracked down. But sometimes it's almost extremely hard to get someone to get a visa to come to the United States. I don't think people realize that either.
Yeah. It's hard.
And it's been that way since post 9/11.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then what's happening with podcasting outside of the U.S. is just, James Cridland's done an amazing job of exposing, various aspects of things that are happening around the world with podcasting. And it's always great to see that. And not all of us, really, like I say, have a lot of avenues to see what's going on with podcasting outside of the U.S. So it's good to see, positive things happening around the world when it comes to podcasting. I had a lot of plans to do a lot more, traveling and going to other countries to promote podcasting and participate in events and things like that outside of the U.S. But this COVID thing kind of shot that down pretty fast.
We got the notification from Podcast Movement a few days ago. We got to pick our booth space.
Yeah, I saw that.
And I see where you guys are stashed. So I
Stashed in the corner, you mean?
In the corner. I basically chose to be up near Podbean. I just don't know if that. I hope you guys made a good choice in that, because of course you can't see the scale either. That's the problem with those maps.
Well, my concern was being too close to the doors, I think, is what my worry was on that. But
because I immediately looked at the opposite corner and I thought, no, that's going to be stashed over and probably
it is
Neverland.
close to the elevators coming down from the main.
Right. So you're right inside the door to the right.
Right.
So
I'm just hoping that we'd be back a little bit,
Oh.
not right up next to the doors, because I'm not sure which way the doors open.
So I don't know who, and probably Rob picked the booth
Yeah,
space.
he did.
So I
He did.
picked ours, and we're, it's going to be Podbean and us. That's where I picked.
Oh, okay. So
So-
you're directly back from that same door entrance.
Well, I'm on a row though. I'm on the first row.
On the right, right?
Yeah, but I'm not on the inside, or I'm not on the outside. I'm on the inside part of the row. So
Oh, okay. Okay, so you are next to Podbean.
right next, right next to them. Yeah, but we've
okay.
been beside each other before. It's no big deal.
Yeah,
So,
Yeah.
but
true.
but yeah, so I
true.
saw that. But are you guys? What's your guys? What are your thoughts on this UK event?
I don't even know what to say about that one.
We haven't decided if we're going to attend
It's
yet.
kind of hard to plan for something like that.
Right.
You can put a stake in the ground, I guess, but who knows what the world's going to look like
I'll be surprised if they make their first date.
Yeah.
But they have 2 alternate dates. But,
So we're talking about an event that's in Manchester, UK, in outside of London. It's called the podcast show? I think is what the official name is.
Yeah.
And they're thinking that they're going to get what did they say?
A lot.
10,000 people there or something like that.
Yeah.
I think is what their goal was. I think it's a little aspirational, considering that would be the largest podcasting event in the world.
And we would have, to make this really happen, things are going to have to, if you think about the vaccine, so we're going to have a vaccine here in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And 40 million doses.
It's just getting it out to people.
And so, maybe by April, we'll have a first shot, and you're going to have to get 2.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure countries are going to make it a requirement that, I just can't see them opening up borders. I mean, if you have, and they say in a quote unquote, you can still be a spreader if you have a vaccine. Remember, vaccine doesn't prevent you from getting COVID. It just helps you fight it off. So you can still get COVID and having had the vaccine.
Right.
So I don't know. I guess we'll see what happens there. But
so that is true then, that it doesn't prevent you from catching it then.
No,
is that what you're saying?
No. It doesn't prevent you from catching it. You can still catch COVID, but you would not have, maybe be completely asymptomatic. That's my understanding. But I think you still can catch it. It's just all a vaccine does is help you.
Do the symptoms get muted?
I don't. Again, someone's going to say, "Tied to your doctor," and you don't know what the hell you're talking about. So I don't claim to be a doctor, but just like they have all kinds of, the polio vaccine prevented you from getting polio. So but maybe it just wasn't as strong. I'm assuming. Again, I'm not a. Don't take anything I say as fact.
Right. I mean, if that is the case, that does create another question, right? Of if this thing can, which means that we're all going to get it, is what it means.
Well, ultimately, I think we will all get it, but
right.
And that's if we can all get it and not die, that's a good thing. It kills it. It runs out of power. That's the herd immunity.
I guess it depends on what kind of damage it can do.
That's how they achieve herd immunity is the virus is starved for new host, and it doesn't have more transmission places to go, and that's how they die. And that's the reason for getting a vaccine is you expedite the herd immunity. But,
well, if you think about it, that's essentially what the flu virus is too, or the flu shot, right?
Yeah.
Is basically dead flu virus,
right? Is
part of what's in that, right?
But
so you're putting those antibodies into your body is what you're doing.
So we'll see if and the flu shot's only 50% effective because sometimes they get it wrong. They pick one, they think it's going to go one way or the other, and it does this. So we'll see, but I think I'd like to support it.
Well, my question is, what's going to happen to the flu? Just the common flu? Are they going to solve that problem, or are we going to continue to have that?
That's never going away. And I don't think they're even counting flu numbers this year. So,
I mean, it is an interesting question to think about. If we put all this effort into solving the COVID problem with the vaccine,
but
because the common flu is basically very similar to it, right? Why don't we solve that too?
The reason we don't put as much effort into it, Rob, is it doesn't kill as many as it kills a lot. I think the flu kills 30, 40,000 a year.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not quoting any facts here.
Yeah, right. It just doesn't kill enough.
It doesn't kill enough to make people get too worried about it.
I guess so. Wow. Okay.
And thus the pushback from a lot of people who, that's why we got part of the problem in the country. We got a lot of people in the country that, and again, it's your choice if you take a flu vaccine or not, or a flu shot. I don't think they call it a vaccine. It's a flu shot. So is a flu shot a vaccine? Let me even ask.
I think they do consider it to be a vaccine, but I'm not sure. It's not like a cure. It's more of a preventative, is what I always thought it was.
Influenza flu shot is a flu vaccine. Yep.
Right.
So
right. I always thought prevented you from catching it. So,
well, I have had, because of traveling to CES, I've taken a flu shot every year for 10 years. And I know there's other people that tell me you're crazy. And I know people that don't get flu shots because they say every time I get a flu shot, I get sick. Well, you sometimes get a little bit sick from the flu shot, but
because it's actually putting dead virus in your body. That's what it's
so, and they say it's not supposed to, but we've all of us have taken enough flu shots to know that sometimes you get sick when you take a flu shot. So it goes against common opinion.
It could also just be,
coincidental
too. Sorry, right?
Yeah, but at the same time, I've taken a flu shot and then come down and been sick as a dog for 2 weeks because whatever they picked that year was the other strain came out and was more heavy. So, but then there's been other years I've took it and not got anything. Went to CES and shook 100,000 people's hands and was coughed on, and you talk about a germ heaven. You go to a trade show, my God,
Yeah.
So I don't know. I guess we'll see. I haven't got a flu shot this year. I guess I should get one.
Yeah, I haven't got one either yet.
You just go down to your local Walgreens or.
I figured there was like zero chance of me catching the flu this year because I'm not around anybody.
You're wrong.
I'm wrong?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, you're wrong.
It's going to come through my microphone from you, Todd.
So I don't know. I just
boy, I better sanitize this thing.
I think there's enough people that are vaccine deniers too. And again, I don't care if you get a vaccine or not.
Yeah.
But I think there's going to be plenty of vaccine to go around because there's so many people that won't take the vaccine. So I'm thinking this 40 million doses, I might be able to get in on the early run.
Oh my God. Yeah. We don't have to go down that path.
Oh, I'm going to, hey, you might be surprised, Rob, how many people are not going to take this vaccine. There's a lot.
Jesus.
There's a lot. They said like 43% or something are not going to get it. So.
Okay.
Yep. But
Yep.
It is what it is. I'm going to get mine because I'm ready to travel again.
So, Todd, did you see this quote in Pod News by Paul Vogel from Spotify saying that we really feel good about the demand for podcasts and podcast advertising on our platform. He also added that Joe Rogan has done better than expected so far. And that podcast goes exclusive on December 1st.
Well, they've also said they're not done spending money.
Yeah, I heard that too.
So we both have a chance yet to be owned by Spotify.
Yeah.
Well, it's if they're spending money like a drunk sailor, so I'm not surprised they're going to say this.
Well, they're trying to buy up the medium.
Mm-hmm.
Don't they understand that they don't really control the medium?
Well, if you continue to buy more big shows, then
I guess eventually
they're trying to do economy of scale here. And when if you're a media buyer, you're chomping at the bit just to buy from them.
What Spotify is doing is going to push the issue with their competitors too.
Oh yeah.
You're starting to see it already. Kind of domino. There's I'm anticipating moves from a few other platforms. How about you? Yeah.
What do you want me to say, Rob? You want me to break an NDA here?
I don't know that there is anything to say. Yeah.
Yeah, there's gonna be more move by more platforms. And some of it's really good. And
we aren't done with the new platforms either.
No, we're not done.
Things are still bubbling.
So, we'll see what happens here, but the needle keeps being moved by all these big players with just making sure that podcasters are, understanding what these changes mean to them. I think that's the thing.
Yeah.
So, Joe Rogan going exclusive. So is he still, he's probably not on your guys' platform right now. He's probably long moved, right?
Rob Walsh has been dealing with that. I
Oh.
haven't been
So
directly involved in that.
you don't want to say, but anyway, definitely your bandwidth bill probably has went down. So that's
Put you this way, that is a good thing.
yeah. Maybe Spotify will find out the real cost of hosting a show like that.
Yeah, well,
It's definitely. I saw you guys announced your third quarter results. I know you can't talk too much about beyond what was saying here, but you guys had a good revenue growth quarter. Of course, you guys had to do a big cash payout to your former CEO, so a little bit of an interesting 10Q there. I guess that's the best way to say it.
Well, we're on the hunt for a new CEO too, so
that's
the other
good.
thing
You guys
going
haven't
on.
called me, so
Haven't called. Todd's on speed dial.
No, yeah, I'd probably be fired for just saying that. I'm just joking.
Yeah.
So, well, and, I know Lori's running the company now, so
Oh well, she's always really run the company. So
yeah. So why don't I just make her CEO?
that's my vote, but let's put it that way.
Yeah, but you can just only say that as a Rob.
Yes. Yeah. Right. I can.
Yeah.
I don't really have a vote in it, so it's all right.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
What else is going on here? I'm just looking through the news. There's just it's been a lot of stuff, and a lot of discussion points too about all these deals.
I saw that the Veritone folks launched a audio licensing library, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, I don't know if I paid too much attention to that.
Yeah, it's where they are going to offer licenses to use clips from various audio sources.
Oh, okay.
Right. Kind of like what's been going on in cable news for a long time, where
right.
people can come in and buy video clips from their competitive networks to play against those networks.
Oh, I know what I needed to tell you.
That brought something up, huh?
Yes, and it actually I don't know how I got triggered by this, but I got a little note from our friends at Apple, and they said, yes, you can still add. Let me see if I can find the comment he made to me. No, not this one. He said, let me go. Let me find it. Where's the discussion? Oh, here it is, I think. He says, the Apple rep says, add an RSS feed to Apple Podcasts. I know it's a bit hidden, he says, but you go to Library on the podcast app.
Right.
Go to Library, and then you go to Edit in the top right-hand corner, and then you can add show by URL. It's right on the bottom. So you can still do this. So again, to get there, to add a RSS feed manually, you go to Library, top right-hand corner, hit Edit,
buried with that.
And then it'll show your shows and everything you're subscribed to. So if you're subscribed to a lot of podcasts, you have to scroll down and you just add a show by URL, and gives a little pop-up to be able to put the subscribe link in there.
URL in there?
Yeah.
Right.
So thanks for that clarification, and I understand why you kind of got.
You can take an RSS feed and submit it to your own library. That's what it comes down. And that was a common feature of a lot of the earlier podcast listening.
And part of the reason is because it's a lot of private RSS feeds can be authenticated through the Apple Podcast app. So you can add a private podcast feed and you have a username password to authenticate a feed if you have a private podcast. So that's how they essentially continue to support that. But I had lost track of where they put it, but it's definitely there.
So Todd, here's a quote that came out of a session at RAIN Australasia podcast conference or radio podcast conference. It was a quote from a fellow out of Australia, and in New Zealand. His name was Ollie Wards, and he said here, talking about what's the future of podcasting around ultra short, ultra long shows, and he's quoted in here say, "I just think that we are going to see continued disparity between really long form, deep dive, full length conversations and very, very, very short stuff like TikTok kind of 15-second type things, where you might be able to tell a story in 15 seconds, whether that's audio or video, which is crazy short compared to a Joe Rogan podcast that's 3 hours long. So ultra short versus ultra long content and less in the middle." So is what this fellow thinks that the medium is going towards.
Here's what I'll tell you about TikTok. They have officially invented a time machine.
Right.
Now, those that use TikTok know what I'm talking about, because you can sit down on your phone at 7:00 at night and play on TikTok, and all of a sudden it's midnight, and you don't know how.
You know how you got there.
You don't know how you got there.
Well, it's not just TikTok. I mean, this is Instagram too, right?
No, TikTok has perfected the time machine.
Right.
So if you think about it,
quick to the next video, very quickly.
15 seconds to a minute.
Right.
No, nothing more than a minute. So sometimes people have to do. It's not really conducive for serialized content because it doesn't feed it to you that way. So you're going to get some stuff that's like, part 3 of a story, and then you have to stop. You got to go find the provider. You got to scroll down through their list, find part 1, and listen to part 2, part 3. Right. So it's that kind of consumption. I don't know if I could handle. What can you tell me in 60 seconds in a podcast?
Or how about 15 seconds, Todd?
Without something visual, I don't know if it'll work.
I think Gary Vaynerchuk's been playing around with this a little bit too, but he does it more in a video format,
right?
Because
right.
you can communicate more quickly, more information in a 15-second video than you can in a 15-second audio piece.
But Gary Vaynerchuk has a personal guy that comes with him 24 hours a day.
Oh, he's got a whole team behind him.
A whole team that is.
I mean, he's been hiring people to work with him on this for a couple of years now.
He doesn't have to get his camera out. He says something profound in a meeting, and it's been captured already on, because they got people recording 24
constantly.
Hours.
I mean, just when he just meets people,
right?
While he's traveling, he's probably not doing as much of that. So they're probably tapping into old archives,
because so
doing stuff.
He just. That's what happens when you can
everything.
That's what
everything.
That's what happens when you can have, afford to have that type of someone covering you. But Gary, it's interesting history on Gary and how he started a podcast. Everybody knows he was a podcaster first. Everybody knows that, right?
Yeah, I met him back in 2007, just as he got started. He was an interesting guy.
He was a successful business guy already, and
he had a wine company. He was running, right? Yeah. Or a liquor company might be a better way of saying it.
Yeah.
It was like a distributorship is what he was doing.
Rick says, it takes that long to just greet my guest. And Addie says, totally, LOL, TikTok is something else. So, Addie, you have been in TikTok time warp, haven't you?
Right.
So
it's time traveling is what it is.
Rob, have you ever used TikTok?
Oh yeah, sure.
So it's
and I'm seeing a lot of those features come over to Facebook and Instagram and all that stuff. And it wouldn't surprise me to see it come over to Twitter eventually.
What we need to figure out is how we get OnlyFans accounts for podcasters.
Right.
For those of you that don't know what OnlyFans is, a lot of people are making a lot of money on OnlyFans. But it's content that I wouldn't be putting out there.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I do think, Todd, that the next big thing that's coming, and you're starting to see the early signs of it right now in more of the political realm right now, is niche genre platforms.
Oh, I think so too.
Taking over more and more, and I think it's going to come to podcasting too.
To me,
just a matter of time.
Networks have been big in podcasting for a long time, but I have that sense as well that niche networks will be really.
Yep. So to be, we've seen signs of it in the past too, around, sci-fi networks and like sports networks and things like that. But I think it's going to expand much more so. So you think about the diversity of topics that are covered in podcasting from around, genres or whatever. You can kind of visualize that the bigger ones that are aggregating large amounts of content are going to start working together, right? Team up with each other. I mean, just like all the women podcasts. This is a good example. Like She Podcast could be this huge podcast listening platform, right? Potentially.
Well, time will
that's
tell.
what I'm talking about, right?
Addie says, LAMO, not finding a lot of podcasters there. That's true.
Yeah, opportunity knocks.
Well, I've seen some TikTok folks where they're doing 60-second news segments, recaps of stuff that's going on. So I've seen some of that. So, you can.
It's like, there was a little bit of flurry a couple months ago about Pinterest being a place to promote your podcast too. So, maybe TikTok is a place to build audience around podcasting as well.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see.
Maybe not.
I don't know. It's not. Again,
it's a cross promotional opportunity, not a primary.
Yeah, and it really depends. You have to be careful what you like because it feeds you all kinds of different stuff. I've tried to be real careful in liking stuff, but if I hit it once in a while, then all of a sudden I get fed a thread of
barrage of stuff. Right?
Yeah, stuff. Yeah. So
it takes signals and funnels you into pathways.
Yeah. Hey, we're on Twitch today, Rick. We're streaming on Twitch. Nobody watches over there, but we're on Twitch. All right, we're already at an hour and a half.
Let's bigger out of here, as they say.
Yeah. So what are we going to do, Rob? Are we going to do a show on Wednesday before Thanksgiving, or?
Yeah, I'm game if you are.
All right.
I'm just at home.
All right. So
I might as well get online. I have bandwidth, and I'm sure you will have bandwidth then too.
Yeah. So what about the day after Black Friday? Are we going to do a Saturday show?
Of course.
All right. We'll have to talk about that because I might have important shopping to do. I'm just joking.
Really?
Right on my computer. Might go to an outlet mall.
I didn't get a chance to mention before, but I'm going to be getting a teleprompter.
Oh, yeah.
I've already ordered it. I'm going to have it by Friday. So,
well, you can script your whole response to the show. But
actually, no. There's two purposes. One would be to be able to do pre-recorded videos, shorter videos, right, for various purposes, and then also just to have you, right, when I do a show with you, to look directly at the camera.
Because I look at you directly through the camera because you're behind me on the wall.
Right.
So it used to have to do this, but I see that there.
Right. So you don't probably need it per se.
No.
But my particular situation, I have to look at I have to look down or over or something like that to be able to see you instead of looking directly at the camera, which once I get this teleprompter, I'll be able to see you because I can only see myself right now because I'm using a camcorder.
Mm-hmm.
So I have the little window that's open on the camcorder.
Right, to see yourself.
I can see myself, but I can't see you.
Right.
So
that's interesting. So you can actually put me. That's kind of scary.
Right in front of the lens. Right.
Oh, interesting. Which you have to tell me which one you got so we can take a look at it. Okay. There was something I was going to tell you before we got out of here. What the heck was it? I guess it was not important. It'll come to me after we get off and I'll be pissed, but oh well. All right, everybody. Todd at blueberry.com, at Geek News on Twitter.
I'm on Twitter at Rob Greenlee. And you can send me an email if you want, robg@lipson.com.
We thank you for tuning in today, and we'll be back with you with the cool sounds of the New Media Show. Again, on this coming Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern. I know all of you are going to be getting off work early because you're all going to have Turkey Day the following day, and you're going to, but take some time. Oh, I know I was going to tell you. It came to me. So take some time and come join us live Wednesday at 3 o'clock for an hour and a half. So what I was going to tell you, Rob, is here in Michigan, everything's locked down. The restaurants are all closed, only for takeout. So yesterday, I drove 13 miles south, crossed over into Indiana. There was this invisible bacteria border as we crossed into Indiana. And I went to a restaurant, had dinner last night, sitting down.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
So, the COVID couldn't get beyond the Michigan-Indiana border. So Indiana is open for business for those of you in Michigan that want to go out to dinner. And
right.
they're socially distancing.
Right. And we're there's no way you can catch this through watching us. So come join us.
All right, buddy. We'll see you next time. Everyone take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.